Howdy folks, and welcome to a very special video. In this video, we're going to introduce you to the future of Lifestyle Overland going full size. Now, we've been contemplating this next move for a very long time. Had a lot of great discussions with a lot of different folks, tested a few different rigs here and there, and decided finally on a 2021 Toyota Tundra, the last of the V8s. All right, are you ready? Let's dive in. For our first Tundra modification, I drove 11 hours south to Chandler, Arizona, where Bush Company USA is headquartered. You've probably noticed by now that we switched to their South African-made tents and awnings over the past year, and honestly, haven't looked back. It's been a massive upgrade in quality, strength, and ruggedness for our frequent travels. And this is Barry's family wagon, the shaggin' wagon. I wonder if he did a pass-through to that tent. That would be pretty slick too. All right, so not wasting any time here, let's get some fun bits installed on this puppy. There's the man right there. Got you working. I saw that. Yeah. While they're relatively new in the States, Bush Company has been the gold standard in South Africa and Australia for years, and truly make the flood of cheap Chinese knockoffs look like children's toys in comparison. And while there's a place for all grades of gear depending on how frequently you use it, theirs is definitely top tier and perfect for our demanding use. So when we heard they had something special cooking for the American truck market, I didn't hesitate to move it to the top of our build sheet. One of the biggest reasons we went with a truck instead of something like a Sequoia for our full-size rig is because I really enjoyed having true separation from our gear when we rented a Tacoma in Alaska just a couple years ago. It made for a quieter, less cluttered ride experience without listening to those random rattles from the gear in the back. It also gave us more peace of mind for the safety aspect in case we were ever in a rollover or even just a hard braking incident that pushes everything into the passenger area. But moving it to the bed was only half the battle. We also needed something to keep it all organized and contained. So, since Bush Company USA is the official distributor for MSA 4x4 gear, we decided to give their drawer system a try. I'd already gotten a sneak peek of these last year at Overland Expo and was blown away by the build quality and features like this fully extended slide and built-in automatic LED strip. Since this is the first Tundra install for this system, we'll have a few extra steps to fully extend the carpeted platform to the edge of the bed, but this was the perfect time to mock up everything and get some CAD drawings in the works for a complete wing system. Now, it was time for the real reason we were here. This was the moment I've been waiting for ever since Dean and Barry had mentioned that these were coming to America. A South African-built, welded aluminum, single-piece truck canopy. The best part about this unit is the fact that there's no assembly required. So there's no seams to leak like other canopies that require you to bolt them together piece by piece. Which also means it has a rating of 550 pounds for tents, awnings, or whatever else you want to anchor to the top. And with the gull wing doors on both sides, it means we can get to whatever we need without crawling in from the rear hatch. I was super impressed with the bracket system included with this Tundra model since it bolts to the factory tie-down points in the bed, so there were no custom anchor points to drill out. This whole thing installed in about 20 minutes, and then we were ready to roll a lot faster than I expected. All right, well, Bush Company, you've outdone yourself here. It's like it was made for it. That is sick. All comes shipped complete, no assembly required like some of the other caps, and surprisingly lightweight. What does it weigh in at, do you know?
100 pounds, 150 pounds.
150 pounds? Dang. And all this is now going to be protected storage. You can't see what's inside from here, yet you still get a glass in the back with this protective stuff here. Be able to lock up the MSA slides as well. Super happy. Next, it was time to get back to Utah and get one of the more critical components installed, the wheels and tires. We ended up going with an 18-inch method MR312 with a positive 18mm offset to help ensure the rubber stays mostly within the wheel wells, which is also going to help avoid some rubbing on the fender liners and body mounts. If you've ever built an Overland rig, then you know there's nothing like the smell of that fresh rubber, and the sight of the shiny new wheels gets your heart racing for what comes next. A huge thanks to Brad and team at Big O Tires for mounting up these bad boys. With most of our Stage 1 parts in hand, it was time to really get to work. But first, let me give you a quick walk around of the garage. Alright, howdy folks and welcome to the garage. This is where the magic happens. A lot of my videos I really try to focus on the artistic style and things like that, but in the garage, we're going to get things done. So this Tundra behind me is about to get a laundry list of things installed. As you can see, we've already jumped ahead and got a few fun things. We'll talk about those in a bit, but I figured I've never given you a walk around of the garage, so let me show you what's going on in here.
All right, for starters, over here, this is a 240 volt pressure washer. No engines to listen to. It's amazing. This is my little worktop desk. You've also seen that in some of my Coffee with Kevin sessions. Fun bits. We have some Fox things. We have some RCI things. Shout out to RCI. They're actually build partners on this rig, so you're going to be seeing a lot more of that. We've got some new brands. MSA 4x4. This is all going to be hitting our store over at overland.pro, so keep an eye out for that stuff, along with some bits from Bush Company. These are the MSA 4x4 drawer slides that will be going into the truck, but right now I'm waiting on the wing portions. And then, by the way, this thing's been awesome. I just wish, hey, Pro Eagle, if you're listening, can you make a caster so when I'm home, I can pop this off and do a traditional like rolly caster? That would just make the expensive price a lot more worth it. 285, 75, R18. So these are supposed to be roughly 35-inch tires. If you measure them, they're actually 34.25 inch. That's okay. But this is the narrower option. So most people go with the 12.5 inch. This keeps us a lot narrower, which means we'll reduce how much rub we get. And no, the garage isn't always this organized. I cleaned it up just for you. Over here we have the Shrine to DeWalt. Been slowly adding to the kit. If you watch on Black Friday, you can pick up these for like half off. So every Christmas, I try to pick up 1 or 2 bits. So we've got our 3/8 inch ratchet, 1/4 inch impact, 3/8 impact, 1/2 inch impact, drill, light, grinder, and this guy, a right angle drill. If you don't have one of those, it'll save you so much headache. And this little gem by Ingersoll Rand. Now the reason why the stepchild is hiding out over here is because DeWalt does not make anything like this yet. But for trimming body panels, dude, let me tell you, that right there is worth its weight in gold. Grease gun, blower, sucker, and travel kit. And then we've got all kinds of boxes. The delivery people really love the fact I'm building something now because they really wanted more to deliver. Upper control arms, snorkel, seat covers, blackout kit, compressor, and all kinds of other fun bits. Got the toolbox over here. This is something like a 1940s Mac toolbox. I've had this thing for many, many years. And then my main toolbox is just a Homac that was dent and ding sale. But it has been awesome. I have replaced the slides in it once already, but it does a great job for what we need to get done. We're going to go ahead and mount the wheels and tires as this thing sits in its stock configuration, because I want to clearance every piece of plastic, every body mount, anything that might be in the way of this mouthful of a tire, because I know if I can get it clearanced here, that when I do put the 3-inch suspension on it, it's definitely going to clear at that point, and especially as things flex out. So we're going to do our best to fix any issues before this thing gets on the trail. And you might notice the color looks a little bit different on this. Well, that's because we have Expel matte paint protection film. So this is a clear paint protection film, thicker than a typical graphic vinyl wrap. It has a 10-year warranty, and it says it's self-healing. And what that means is if you scuff it, if you scratch it, if you get it out in the sun, if you get it with some heat, it's supposed to mitigate those scratches automatically, which is extremely important for such a dark vehicle. And I know a lot of you commented on what a nightmare it was going to be to go with a dark vehicle. So we're going to put this to the test and see, number one, if it protects the paint, which we're pretty confident it's going to do that. And number two, will itself continue to keep looking good? So thank you, Expel. Thank you, DC Customs down in Bountiful, Utah, for helping us out with that. And then, excuse me, sir. Technology, I tell you. Trying to wash these things is really irritating too, because you keep hitting that thing. All right, so the paint protection film isn't the only thing that we've done. We've also got ceramic tint. So we've done the Utah legal limit up front, a little bit darker back here in the back, and something I've never done, and I only did it because it was suggested, and I'm very curious at this point, but we did the windshield. Let me tell you, I parked this thing in a parking lot for probably an hour in 100-degree heat. And when I hopped in, I fully expected that oven effect. It was warm, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't blazing hot. So the ceramic does make a huge difference. All right, I think that gets you up to speed. So I got to get busy. It is hot here in Utah, so I got to crack this door open, get a fan blowing just to get some residual AC out here. But we're gonna just get some stuff done. I'll show you as we go along what my thought process is for getting these massive wheels and tires fitted in here. Oh yeah, almost forgot to mention the fancy 20-inch fuel wheels that were on this thing. Traded them out. Got something a little more practical for the interim, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's why there's a change.
Now, before I could jump into the tire fitment, I decided to knock out something that has been bugging me since day one. These cheesy, massive side steps. While they would have made my papaw proud, they offer zero protection while off-road and would in fact become nothing but a damage multiplier on the first rock that they met. So, they had to go. We'll have some proper sliders from RCI going on in their place later on. A Stark Height vehicle, pretty decent ground clearance, although I have been going to the gym for 2 days. Now, it's worth mentioning that this will do 98% of what we do. Don't think that you have to continue from this point forward to have a good adventure. This is really all you need. A good four-wheel drive truck, good tires, get out, go. You can figure out the rest later. But we've done this before, and we like our toys, so we're going to make this thing into a monster. So kick back, relax, ride along. I was very curious to see what our final ride height would be with the new tires and upcoming suspension, so I quickly jotted down a few measurements to see where we land.
Alright, so I already jumped ahead just a little bit on this tire. I got those new ones in and I just couldn't help myself. I had to kind of test fit it. So here's what we've done already on this wheel well.
Even though it had been a long day of editing, I couldn't keep myself out of the garage with that beautiful scent of fresh rubber calling my name. I was also anxious to find out just how much work I had ahead of me if the fitment was going to be a little too tight. With the first fresh shoe temporarily mounted up on Grizz, I was in love with how the color combination came together.
That's a mouthful.
But it was clear that the wheel wells would need a bit of love to receive such a large hunk of rubber, at least at this stock ride height. So I begged my ever-supportive wife to stay up a little bit later with me while I removed a few more pieces of the factory liner to hopefully clear the tire.
Don't laugh at me.
Real quick now.
Don't laugh at me. Just real fast, babe. 5 minutes.
Okay.
All kinds of
as I suspected, the body mount was going to be an issue. Alright, so what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a body mount chop right here. I'm not going to do a patch panel like a lot of folks do just yet. I'm going to run it, see how things go, and then decide kind of how I want to close that back in at a later date. You going to help today? Huh?
What are you going to do? You going to help? Nope, no biting.
In case y'all didn't know, we got a puppy. He's been fun.
Right? But you're so cute. It's okay.
You drive? Yeah. Oh, it's not starting. I'm sorry. We're working right now.
Chop this body.
Even though Abigail is only 17 months old, she's already very interested in all things mechanical and is honestly more inclined to play with a box of hardware than a box of toys. So with so much activity in the garage right now, it's hard for Sarah to keep her in the house. Alright, so now the rough cut is done, but there's some other components with the fender liner, the sheet metal, the pinch weld, all those things have got to be addressed next. So just got to study on this here for a minute and see what the best course of action is going to be. So you can see this doesn't do as much good here if this is still in the way. So we just need to make some cuts, bend some of this out of the way, and call it good. So with the driver's side done, I hopped over to the passenger side, which went a lot faster once I had the process down. After a couple hours of tedious metal and plastic rework, the new rubber was finally clearing the wheel wells and body mounts at its current stock height. So I knew it would definitely be good for any articulation position in the future. Now it was time to install the new wheels and tires in the rear, then just step back and look at it.
Who's that baby? Who's that baby?
Alright, everything's on in its stock format, but it's only going to get better as we put the lift up front. If anything, I would cut a little bit more off at the bottom of that body mount, but I think we're going to be okay. Gotta go for a test drive now, right? Just to see how it feels. Alright, nice little test drive. Didn't go very far, just making sure everything kind of cleared and romping on it a little bit, just having some fun and The difference between the 33s and the 35s is just night and day as soon as you start backing out of the driveway. It just rolls so smooth. Now, I put about 2 or 3 miles on them just to kind of get a feel for it. This wheel and tire combo is actually running balance speeds. This is the first time that I've ever tried them. I've heard mixed reviews on them. My tire guy said take them, try them. If they don't work out, no worries, just bring them back and we'll rework it. But the first drive out, it was fine. Like, it was balanced perfectly. When I turned around and came back, I romped on it, and I think that kind of screwed out the balance just a little bit. So I got a little bit of vibration, slowed down, cleared back up. So I'm going to play with this a little bit more and see if I like the balance speeds. As of right now, the jury's still out on whether or not this is going to work. Now, I'm going to get some measurements with just these tires installed with the stock suspension, just to give you an idea of like how much it raises the vehicle with this particular tire. And then we're going to go ahead and install the Fox suspension, the JBA upper control arms, and my custom rear springs that I'm having made by Alcan down in Grand Junction, Colorado. They're the longest lead item right now. So I'm a little impatient. I want to get this thing going. So I'm going to actually just put some spacers in the rear. I know I never thought I would ever do something like this, but it's just a cheap stopgap thing because the lead time is so long on these other springs, and I want to get this thing up and ready for a couple of rides just to see how it does. There's not a lot of weight back here in the back yet, so I think we'll probably be okay for just a couple trips, but I'll let you know if the block install is a go or no go.
With some temporary blocks installed in the rear, which were surprisingly easy to install, it was time to see what kind of lift we gained.
I'll just go on the 2-inch. And my thought is, once the trailer goes on here, those factory rear springs, it's really going to sag. So just trying to offset it, so I'm not going down the trail like this for the first 1 or 2 trips. It's just temporary.
Next, it was time to install some components that I'd been drooling over ever since UPS dropped them off. A set of custom-tuned Fox Performance Elites. Though I will say, the unboxing was a bit anticlimactic, with some hastily shrink-wrapped shocks tied to some crushed boxes. It's probably okay for shipping, but I was just a little disappointed considering what they cost. Thankfully, these boxes avoided the typical thrashing and arrived undamaged. So after a quick inspection from Ace the Toller, it was time to get this Tundra riding a little smoother. I'm especially excited about testing these Fox shocks, since we've already been around the block with Icon and Kings. While the Icon is a decent off-the-shelf option and actually served us well, the Kings really shined off-road under our 4Runner and really do have a superior build quality. What I'm after with these Fox shocks though is better high and low speed control, whereas the Kings only really allow for mid-range adjustment. I really enjoy expanding our horizons and trying new things so that we can share our experience with you so that you can make a more educated choice on your own build. You might have noticed by now, but for a 3-year-old truck, it's got a lot of surface rust from what I'm assuming is the salty roads in Salt Lake City during the winter. Still, I'm a bit shocked at a few of the hardware pieces that were thoroughly rusted on. I'm thinking a rust treatment will be in order before this truck sees another winter. With this big 3-inch jump and lift, the brake lines and ABS cables need special attention to avoid damage. So I'm just going to leave these loose until everything gets dialed in. There are several companies that make extension brackets, so we'll be ordering up a set of those for the long term.
While I appreciate Fox's attempt to make a shock clamp that feels more refined than a hose clamp, after fiddling with these tiny Allen screws for really longer than necessary, I was wishing for that hose clamp by the time I was done getting everything aligned. Though I will say, they do look much better as a finished product. With one last tweak to clear the bump stop bracket, this side was ready for action. After a quick rinse and repeat on the passenger rear, I was itching to move to the front and finally give this thing a proper stance for the trails. But first, I needed to address an issue with the spare tire before we moved on. While 35-inch tires will fit in this spare location, the stabilizers for the smaller factory tire interferes and will eventually damage the sidewall if something isn't done. So using a couple of different methods, I ended up removing the rivets that hold each of these brackets to make a little more room for that matching spare.
Alright, the rear is done. Blocks installed, shocks installed. Cut away the things that were in the way for the spare tire to sit all the way up in its perch. Now, let's move on to the front and get this thing looking a little more level-headed. Alright, for starters, I want to look and see where the upper control arm bolt needs to pass through to come completely out of the factory upper control arm. Sometimes you have to take the battery out. I just want to make sure that it will actually come all the way out before I jack this nose way up in the air.
While this tie rod remover has worked great for the 4Runner and GX, the Tundra is a bigger mouthful, but I didn't feel like another run to the parts store, so a little tool modification seemed to do the trick for now. The main thing at this point is making sure the spindle doesn't run away from me and pull the drive shaft out of the front differential, so it gets tied down before moving on. The factory torque on these upper control arm bolts are no joke, so I had to resort to a custom wrench extension to get enough leverage to break it free. Unfortunately, my proper breaker bar just wouldn't fit in this situation. The nice part about working on this V8 Tundra is that there's all kinds of extra room when it comes to working in and around the engine bay. Usually this process is a two-person job, but since I had already moved the hoses and wires out of the way, it slipped right out. And speaking of easy, I can't emphasize enough just how handy it is to have a collection of battery-powered tools for almost any situation. While you can do all of this with hand tools, it would definitely take 2 to 3 times longer fighting stubborn hardware and tight angles without the benefit of some cordless options. While it's definitely best to loosen the lower control arm bolt at this point to allow everything to droop, I just couldn't get it to break loose after several tries, so I used a long pry bar to bounce the LCA low enough for the coilover assembly to clear its mounts. This process is also easier with the tie rod disconnected, but I saved a little bit of work by skipping that step. Always make sure you get an alignment after this process so they can loosen those adjustment bolts and relieve the pressure on the bushings, which will be in a slight bind after lifting the truck and pivoting that arm downward. Now comes the real challenge. This coilover assembly is 3 inches longer than the stock one I just pulled out, so it's going to take all of my 213 pounds to droop the LCA far enough for it to fit. But thanks to my old friend leverage and a bit of dead weight, it popped into place.
Come on.
Next on the list was a set of JBA heavy-duty upper control arms. These units are going to help us gain a few more degrees of caster since the lift is going to change the geometry of the suspension. Long story short, it gives the alignment tech more flexibility to reach a setting that is better on and off-road. This is actually our third set of JBAs after being super impressed with them on the 4Runner. My favorite feature is their patented grease ports that allow lubrication of the bushing face, which is usually the cause of most squeaks in aftermarket suspensions. And no, we're not sponsored by them, although it wasn't for lack of trying. So let them know we sent you anyhow for a truly impressive product design. Now it was time to mount the shock reservoir, which led me to a fork in the road. Do I keep the sway bar or do I lose the sway bar? After a few minutes of deliberation, I opted to just ditch it entirely. This is actually something we did on our 4Runner a couple of years ago, and it still performed well while having much more flex off-road. Oh, and just as a bit of a spoiler, I've already test driven this setup in real time, and I can honestly say that I can barely tell the sway bar has been removed. After buttoning everything up on this side, I was beyond stoked to finish up the passenger side and get this bad boy one step closer to being trail ready.
All right, now the real question is, what did it give us? Left rear. Now keep in mind, I've already loaded gear in the back of this thing, so it's sitting down further than what we started with. Right rear and right front, 41 3/4. What's that? Oh, oops, you weren't supposed to see that yet. Over 5 inches of lift in the front and nearly 4 inches of lift in the rear. And that's after loading it down with probably about 250, 300 pounds between the drawers and the tools, because this thing's already been out on a trip. We're already in the process of shaking it down, but I tell you what, there's so much more to cover. I gotta stop this video here and pick it back up on part 2. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button, the little notification bell thingy, and we'll be back with another video to finish telling you the story of Grizz, our 2021 Toyota Tundra. But until next time, remember, stay curious, leave it better than you found it.